Hi, Year 7. So the big question today is, well, still, how do we program a computer? Today our focus is going to be on creating something that has a real world scenario to it. We're going to program a nightlight and get it to work. Now, previously, when we were doing microbits last week, we learned about how the microbit is a miniature computer, something that can take in, process, and output data all by itself. However, it is something we need to program ourselves. So that process that's in the middle, well, that's our job. We are telling the microbit what it needs to do when it gets some of those inputs and tell it what to output based off of those inputs. In today's lesson, we are going to talk more and more about those two sides. We're going to talk about the inputs that the microbit has. We can press buttons on it, we can shake it. It's got an accelerometer, it's got a light sensor, it's got a compass heading, it's got a temperature sensor, it's got a sound sensor, and it's got a touch logo on the front of it as well. But those are all the ways in which we can interact with our microbits. But our microbits can't interact with us in all that many ways. They've got an LED display where they can, light up some LED bulbs, or there's a speaker that the microbit can use to show us something using sound. Now the problem is this. My child has just moved into their own room, but they won't sleep without a nightlight. I sometimes forget to turn it on, so they wake me up at night and, well, let's just say they remind me. I need a way of making sure that this nightlight turns on automatically. So that word automatically means by itself, on its own. So can we come up with some ideas of how to get that done? So some of you might have said, something about having a motion sensor in the room, which is a great idea. So whenever someone walks into the room, the nightlight turns on, and maybe it will stay on for a few hours or maybe even a few minutes or whatever you want it to be. But that is, well, not automatic because it relies on someone moving within the room. Well, how about an idea? Well, I could be in the room and while I'm putting my kid to sleep, I could maybe even clap. And if that turns the light on or off, well, that's fine, isn't it? But that again will work, but it's not truly automatic. I've got to be there to clap. And some of you might even say, well, we can just set timers. That's really easy. So if we set timers right at the start, when we get it, we can say the nightlight comes on at 7 p.m. and switches off at 7 a.m., which is a valid idea. However, it's again not truly automatic because, well, I'm going to have to set the time, aren't I? Also, well, we live in Great Britain where sometimes it gets dark at 4 p.m. and sometimes it gets dark at 11 p.m. So we don't want the nightlight to turn on at 7 p.m. if it's not dark yet outside. So we need a way of it to be truly automatic. And the only way to do that is by saying that, well, when it gets dark, the light must turn on. And when it gets light, the light must turn off. So which input should we use on our microbits to get that done? To sense when there is enough light or not enough light in the room? You're absolutely right. It's the light sensor that we need to use. Now, our light sensor gives us the opportunity to measure the amount of light that there is in a room. And what it does is it turns it into a number for us. So the amount of light in a room, it turns it into a number between 0 and 255. 255 being the brightest that room could ever be, and 0 being the darkest that it could ever be. But which output are we then going to use to show, well, some lights being on or off? Well, that's nice and easy. We're always just going to use the LED display. There's no need for us to use any sound on this occasion. So how do we actually program that input? Well, on MakeCode, which you're going to go on in just a moment, in the pink section is a whole bunch of inputs. There's buttons, there's accelerometers, there's temperatures, there's compass headings, but there's one there called light level as well. Then the output, well, that's just going to be show LEDs. We did that last week, and we even did it in the Do Now today. So it's all about getting those light bulbs to shine depending on our input. So that begs another question. How do we get from our light level, which is now a number between 0 and 255, to, well, showing the LEDs or, well, not showing the LEDs? The fact is that we need to ask a question, don't we? We need to say, well, if that light level is ever less than 100, then we want to turn on the LED display. And otherwise, or else, we want to turn it off. That is essentially how this needs to work. That code in the middle is known as our process. Remember, this part here is our input. Apologies for the really bad handwriting. I'm trying to do this with a trackpad. And this part here, where the LEDs are displaying, is our output. I'm getting better at it. There we go. But this bit in the middle, this here is what we can control as programmers. This part, the processing part, is where we are able to control what happens depending on those inputs, and we get to control what outputs are then shown. The code here in the middle is known as an if statement. It will do one thing if the answer to the question is yes, but another thing if the answer to that question is no. The question in this example is the light level less than 100? So if my light level is less than 100 and the answer to that question is yes, then it will do this. But if the answer to that question is no, then it will do this and turn the LEDs off. So our task today is to create that nightlight. When you open it from that assignment, you'll see some starter code and you just need to put it all in order, kind of like a jigsaw puzzle, to make it exactly the same as that pseudocode, that code that we can see on our screens. So how is it that we can make our microbits even better? Well, what we can do is potentially ask more questions about the amount of light that there is in a room. But in all honesty, as long as you've got this, you've got a working nightlight. But to make it even better, we could add some more functionality, like if the light level is ever less than potentially 75, we can turn on all of them. But if it's less than 100, maybe we can turn on just half the lights, or maybe we can even have a brightness level for those lights too, so they only shine a little bit if it's, you know, semi-light in the room, but if it's truly dark, then the light gets a little bit lighter. In any case, creating this is now truly automatic, and it's a system that will work regardless of the criteria you give it. Give it a go, everyone, and create your nightlights.